more research you do on moving to Belleville, the less likely you're actually to do it. I know that sounds backwards, but here's what I've learned after helping dozens of GTA families think through this transition. And I want to be clear about that word, think through. Not every family I talk to ends up moving, but the ones who stop researching and start having real conversations, they all end up with something valuable. Even if that something is just clarity about what they actually want to do. Here's what's really happening when families get stuck between wanting to move and actually moving. You think you're being smart by researching every neighborhood in Belleville, reading every blog post about small town living, watching every YouTube video about relocating from places like the GTA, and honestly, that instinct makes complete sense. This is probably the biggest financial decision you're gonna make in the next decade. Of course you wanna know what you're getting into, but here's what I've noticed. At a certain point, more research stops adding information and starts adding noise. You're not learning new things anymore, you're just finding new reasons to keep the decision at arm's length. Every new article you read, every new listing you save, every question you think of, it all feels like progress. But there's a point where it becomes delay dressed up as diligence. And that's not a character flaw, it's just that it's what happens when the stakes feel high and the path forward feels uncertain. If you're recognizing yourself in this pattern, I put together the Belleville Relocation Roadmap that gives you a clear framework for what to actually look at and in what order. So this research has a finish line instead of going on forever. Check that out, link in the description. The signal that you've crossed into research paralysis is usually this. You've been looking at Belleville for more than, say, 3 months, but you haven't actually talked to anyone who knows the market or driven through a neighborhood or on a weekday morning to see what it actually feels like to live there. You know the stats better than, well, your own retirement timeline. That's when research has stopped helping you. It's like test driving the same car in your driveway for 6 months. You read every review, memorize every spec, compare every feature, but reading about the car will never tell you how it feels to actually drive it somewhere new. At some point, you have to get on the road. So if you've been researching Belleville for months, there's a good chance you already know enough about a real conversation about it. The information you're still looking for probably isn't in another article. It's in a conversation where someone can look at your actual situation, you look at your equity, your timeline, your priorities, and give you a real answer instead of a general one. Now here's what makes the research trap even more kind of interesting. You think you're waiting for the right information, but you're actually waiting for something completely different. Here's a pattern I see constantly. Couples tell me they need more information, but before they can make a decision, then I ask, well, what information are you actually waiting for? And they can't quite name it. They already know the Belleville price range. They already know their equity at their home. They already know the cost of living differences. The information gap isn't really the issue. What's actually happening is they're looking for someone to reflect their situation back to them and say, yeah, this makes sense for where you are in life. And I completely understand that, after 30 years, say, of making financial decisions based on what the family needed, suddenly asking questions like, well, what do we want? It kind of feels unfamiliar, maybe even a little selfish, even though it isn't. So the question comes out sideways, kind of disguised more as research. You can spot this when the questions stop being about data and start being about whether it's okay to even want this. Things like, is it too early to think about slowing down, or are we being irresponsible if we prioritize quality of life? Those aren't questions Google can answer. They're not questions another listing search can answer either. The couples I've worked with who've actually moved forward, whether they meant relocating to Belleville or deciding it wasn't the right fit, they weren't the ones who finally found the perfect market report. They were the ones who had a real conversation where someone could look at their specific numbers and their specific situation and say, here's what this actually looks like for you. And if you've been researching for, 6 months, still don't feel ready, more research probably isn't what you're missing. What's missing is a conversation grounded in your actual situation, not just more general information. And that's genuinely what I'm here for. If you've got questions about what the Belleville market looks like right now, what your equity position might mean for you in terms of retirement and buying a home here, you just want to talk through whether this even makes sense for your situation, just give me a call, send me a text, send me an email, and I'd love to connect and help you through that. Just have a conversation about it. My number and all the information down below in the description. Now, a lot of people I talk to they're not ready to move, and that's completely fine. Sometimes the most useful thing that comes out of that conversation is that you decide, well, this isn't the right time or even the right place. And you can stop second guessing yourself and actually move on with a solid answer. But even when you stop waiting for permission, there's still one more trap that gets well, almost everyone, and it's about timing. There's this idea that somewhere out there is a perfect moment when everything will align, the market is right, the kids are settled, the finances are optimized, you just feel completely ready. And I wanna be honest with you, that moment is probably not coming. Not because your situation isn't good enough, but because that's just not how major life decisions work. There's always something. So here's what I've learned to look for. There are legitimate timing considerations, and there are stalling tactics that feel more like timing considerations. Real timing factors include major family transitions, getting finances organized, coordinating with work situations. But waiting for interest rates to hit a magic number or for the Belleville market to cool by exactly the right amount, that's usually perfectionism wearing a practical disguise. And this gets costly when your personal situation is already aligned. You have the equity, the desire, the life stage freedom, but you're waiting on external conditions that may never land where you're imagining. Right now, Belleville, 300 plus active listings, 45-day average market time. We're kind of on that balance to buyer's market. Not perfect, but it's reasonable, and reasonable is usually enough when your personal readiness is there. Now, waiting for perfect timing to move is like waiting for perfect weather to start exercising. There's always something, you know, it's too hot, too cold, chance of rain. The people who actually get in shape are the ones who exercise in whatever weather shows up. The families who successfully relocate aren't the ones who timed it perfectly. They're the ones who recognize when conditions were good enough. And I'm not saying rush anything. What I'm saying is, if you find yourself waiting for conditions that keep moving the goalposts, it's worth asking whether you're responding to the market or responding to uncertainty. Those require very different conversations. Now, even if you get past the research trap and the timing trap, there's still something that stops most families. And it has to do with the people they love most. This one I hear all the time, and I want to treat it seriously because, well, it is serious. It's important. We can't move 2 hours away from the kids. That's a real consideration. I'm not going to brush it off, but I do want to show you what the numbers actually look like when you dig into it. Most families who've raised this concern are imagining kind of a worst case scenario, an emergency, a last minute need, something where those 2 hours matter. And that's worth thinking through. But when you look at how families actually spend time together at this stage of life, most of it happens on weekends, planned in advance often. And the daily proximity that felt essential when the kids were young, it looks different when they're adults with their own schedules. This becomes a real decision point when you're weighing, the $1.1 million GTA home against a $600,000 Belleville home. And the primary reason for staying is proximity, especially when that close often means 45-minute drive through GTA traffic. Well, Belleville is a straight 2-hour highway drive that you can kind of plan around. So the families I've helped relocate consistently tell me they see their kids more often after moving, not less. Weekend visits become real visits, longer, more relaxed, actual quality time instead of rushed coffee between errands. 2 hours open highway is often easier to take when planned than that 45 minutes kind of on the 401 in the GTA. So only you know how your family actually operates. If daily in-person connection is genuinely part of your life right now, that matters and it should factor into your decision. But if most of your time together is already planned on weekends, the distance calculus looks very different. It's worth sitting down and looking honestly at how you actually spend time with your kids, not how you imagine emergencies playing out. So this is honestly one of the things I find most useful to talk through with families because it's very personal. The math looks different for everyone. So if you want to work through that distance piece actually looks like in your situation, give me a call. Like I said, send me a text, an email. Sometimes just talking it out loud with someone who's been on both sides of this helps more than another hour of research. My number down in the description. I have family that lives in the GTA. We've moved out this way. We go back and forth quite often, and so we're very familiar with that. And I've had a lot of families that have this experience with kids that are there and then moving here. So a conversation often I find really helps, and we can talk over the different areas and the difference in drive times and what that means practically. The last trap is the quietest one. It's not research paralysis or timing math or family logistics. It's just the weight of familiarity. GTA isn't necessarily the right fit anymore, but it's the stress you kind of know by name. And there's something genuinely comforting about that, even when it's costing you. Think about how your neighborhood has changed over the last 30 years. The corner store became a chain, the restaurant you loved closed, neighbors you knew moved away. It's not what it was. But the idea of somewhere new, where you don't know which streets flood in a heavy rain, still feels riskier somehow. And that, honestly, that's not irrational. That's human nature. Your brain treats familiar problems as safer than unfamiliar solutions, even when the familiar problems have been quietly adding up for many years. And this is something I hear often about people that are living in neighborhoods that have changed over the decades. And that's honestly what tends to start the conversation about saying, do I want to move somewhere like Belleville or the Quinte West area because I want it to be what my neighborhood used to be. Watch for this when you catch yourself making arguments for staying that you never accept from anyone else. At least we know what to expect here, or better the devil you know. Those aren't risk assessments, they're comfort zone talking. And comfort zone isn't, well, it's not a bad thing, but it's worth recognizing when it's doing the decision making for you. So here's the question I like to ask. If you currently lived in Belleville, mortgage-free, retired, workshop in the back, quiet street, 20% lower cost of living, would you still move towards Mississauga? Would you take that $1.1 million property and the tax burden and the 45-minute traffic commute in the GTA? Usually people say, no, I don't want that. The question doesn't mean you should definitely move, but it does help separate the decision from the habit. I want to be straightforward about something. Moving is hard. Deciding to move, it's extremely hard. And deciding not to move is also a completely legitimate outcome from this. What I don't want for you is to be in the same just researching loop for 2 years from now, no clearer than you are today. Whether you move or you don't move, just make it a decision, not a drift. And that's why I'm saying you need to start with that conversation. As I mentioned, I did put together a Belleville relocation roadmap that gives you kind of a clear framework to work through everything we've been talking about, what to look at, what order. So the research is kind of has a finish line. So the link down below in the description, I'd highly suggest you go and grab that. Now, if you do want to talk through any of it directly, call or text me. My number down in the description. I'd genuinely be happy to answer specific questions about your situation. Now, if you are one of those that is researching this Belleville, Quinte West area, then there's something most people coming from the GTA, they completely miss. An HST rebate that makes new home purchases significantly cheaper here than you'd really expect. It's the kind of thing that changes the numbers once you actually see it. I broke the whole thing down right here. Check out the video. Talk soon.